Hey everyone, Brian Von VA here. Hope everyone's doing alright today. Are you ready to dive on in? If so, buckle in, strap down, and get ready because we've got a good one for you today. D&D players of Reddit, what is the backstory of your favorite character? Part 1. I'll start off with my own. Ilios, a satyr hexblade warlock in a homebrew setting called Danan. Humans are the dominant race in this setting, and non-humans are looked down on and mistreated, referred to as demi-humans or simply demis. This is the backstory I sent to my DM, written in first person. Growing up as a satyr in Danan, your revelry is everything. They're your family, your best friends, and your lifeline. The one constant in a chaotic and unpredictable life. We're nomadic people by and large, spurning the high stone walls and cramped confines of cities. No. For a proper revel, you need space. We travel the winds, mostly, stopping at villages and smaller towns. Sometimes the folk that live there aren't too fond of us demis, and they'll yell obscenities at us, hurling insults in the hopes we'll leave. Poor idiots. Never challenge a satyr to a battle of wits. Some aren't satisfied with just words though. Some places will be driven out with torches and stones and steel. Those nights we remember, and next time a revelry comes around, you can be sure that their jokes won't be as innocent and harmless as before. Oftentimes we're tolerated or treated with the same respect as you might give a hungry wolf eyeing your child. Those places we move on from without a fuss. There's little fun to be had with such people. Sometimes, though, we'll stumble across a place where they really know how to celebrate, and we'll be welcomed with open arms and full wine cellars. That's when the revel truly comes alive, blurring fact and fantasy until all you know is pleasure and mirth and good company. It was a warm summer's night that changed everything. The stars were bright and the revel was in full swing. Wine flowed freely and every face was split with laughter and merriment. Every face save one. A mother. Panicked and distraught, her children were missing, having strayed too far from the revelry. Most of the night is a blur after that. I remember snippets, confused snatches of sight and sound, devoid of context or meaning. Hooves beating, trees flashing by, shouts and hollers, the pounding of my heartbeat. I remember finding the children. They were scared, small, horns barely nubs. I was told later that they had been found by a group of humans. The first rock was thrown just as we arrived. I don't remember that. All I can recall is fury and fear and speed, and an ancient shrine hidden deep within the forest stood before me. A spear half set deep into the stone, pointed proudly skyward, illuminated by a shaft of moonlight. The sound of our pursuers faded into silence as I approached the shrine. Flight and violence and panic forgotten, my whole world falling away into nothingness, save for that spear. I reached out slowly, entranced, as if in a dream. My hand touched the haft, grasping it, pulling it free of the stone. My senses rushed back to me, world snapping into focus with a crystalline clarity I'd never felt before. The humans arrived in the clearing, shouting and cursing. Some brandished rocks or sticks, while others had possessed the foresight to bring torches. All bore the same look in their eyes, one I couldn't quite place. Realization hit me like a thunderbolt. They just wanted to play. They didn't seem to be very good at it, though. Maybe no one had ever told them how? Well, that settled it. I was just going to have to teach them. A grin split my face as I rushed forward, strange energy boiling up around me, laughter bubbling up from my throat. We were going to have so much fun. Crimson splashed as the spear flashed around me, and the noises the humans were making changed. What was that sound? It seemed familiar. Was it laughter? Yes, it must be. Their laughter joined my own as we danced and played, peals of joy and merriment filling the night air. This was good. This was right. Every spoil sport should learn how to play, and I could teach them all. Still new to D&D, so I'm sorry that it's probably not too good or if I get anything wrong, but my favorite character backstory so far is my high elf duelist, Echo, who was raised by orcs. Essentially, her mother was an incredibly skilled duelist who came from a long line of duelists, all passing down this one mithril, or you could say mithril if you like Lord of the Rings, longsword. One day while she was pregnant with Echo, her village was attacked by orcs. Her mother fought hard, but was eventually kidnapped. Echo's father was presumably killed in the raid. The orcs attempt to impregnate my mother, not knowing that she is already pregnant. Eventually, the pregnancy starts to show, but obviously takes much longer than the orcs were expecting. The orcs start to think that maybe this is some big, powerful half-orc or even full orc and start worshipping Echo's mother, as she's carrying the Great Prophecy baby. They plan to name the Great baby Nika, or Cole. She is never left alone, so she can't escape. When she gives birth, the chief and the orc who thought he impregnated her are both present. When a full elf pops out, not a half-elf, not a half-orc or an orc, nope, a full-blooded elf, the orc, who thought he was her father, flips, ripping her mother's body in half, and dangles Echo over his mouth to eat her. The chief stops him, essentially just saying, "Wait, keep the baby." So the chief raised Echo, or Nika as he named her, as his own daughter, teaching her orcish ways, gave her her mother's sword, hired a human to teach her how to duel. Eventually, the chief has his own half-orc son, Cole. Nika helps raise him for the short time that he is young, and then loves and cares for her little brother. Cole, wanting to be like his big sister, decides to be a duelist too. I know, half-orc duelist is a weird combo, but bear with me here. Eventually, the chief dies, and Cole is named the new chief. Him and Nika work to eradicate the tradition of kidnapping people, but the orcs continue to raid, and they accidentally kidnap a princess from a nearby kingdom. The king declares war, sending his army to attack the village, with strict orders to not kill, but kidnap as many as possible. Nika and Cole are the last standing, but eventually are taken too. They are held in a dungeon for a few weeks before they can hear crowds roaring. Nika knows what is coming and starts to prep herself as best as she can. Eventually, Nika is thrown into an arena. She can hear the king, "Winner walks, loser dies." She holds her sword high, but she didn't account for the fact that this kingdom wanted these fights as far as possible. Barbarian versus barbarian, fighter versus fighter, duelist versus duelist. Nika looked at her opponent and saw Cole. Classic brains versus bronze. They had never fought such a harsh battle in either of their lives, and unfortunately, brains won, because Nika was an elf. The king showed her much more benevolence. They nursed her back to health. She left the kingdom, taking the adult name Echo, and swearing to herself that Nika died that day too. I know it's a little weird, but I accidentally said in the first session that she was raised by orcs and had to fix my mistake by writing a convoluted backstory. She was my second ever character and my first ever backstory. TLDR. High elf duelist raised by orcs had to kill her best friend, which I think was also technically considered her brother. Valenor Noir is a dragon-born warlock/rogue. He was born into a family of wizards, but was born a lot more draconic than most of his kind, such as having wings and a tail. These abnormalities led to his mother dying in childbirth. He was raised by his loving father and was taught magic under him, but was often chastised for attempting spells he was not ready for. This came to a head while he was studying alone. He read aloud a warlock oath that calls an entity to the reader's side to offer a pact. In this case, the entity that answered this call was Loki, who was greatly amused at the circumstances. He offered Valenor a pact and in exchange gave him one task: entertain me. And so, he began life on the road, not wanting to bring his family into what was sure to be a new chaotic lifestyle. He often got involved in random hijinks, both involving his fellow mortals and the other Norse gods at Loki's behest. For example, he defeated the leader of a crime ring in a small city before accidentally saving the leader's life from a rival. Moved by this act of mercy, he became the crime ring's new dawn. He controlled the group through intimidation and actual solid planning despite having no idea what he was doing, something Loki finds hilarious. Stealing Mjolnir from Thor, he left a note both apologizing for the situation and revealing its location. Recovering lost souls as a favor for Hel, a common occurrence parents that led to a strong friendship between the two, and many more shenanigans. Despite that, he is well liked by the rest of the Pantheon, as they understand that Valenor doesn't really have a choice but to go along with Loki's scheme of the week. Well liked enough, they occasionally bring him to Asgard for parties and poker nights. Unfortunately, the campaign where I played Valenor got canned a while ago, but I'm still holding on until the next opportunity to use him arises. Verem Reynold was a kid when his out-of-the-way, no-named village suffered a near-total collapse. There was a wolf attack that, while the village itself survived, the wolves took a lot of the able-bodied villagers, including Verem's own parents. This event would lead into more and more disasters that would decimate the village. Droughts, fires, famine, disease all attacked the dwindling village, and as the years of this went on, more and more survivors left the village to live in kingdoms protected by their giant stone walls and food aplenty. Verem had been stricken the worst. The drought and famine withered his already frail body away, letting the diseases overtake him. Death was seemingly absolute. Then the sound of a flute could be heard. A new sound, one that was blaring at first, but soon the village came to love the music. A roaming cleric followed, arriving to the dying village, and immediately began to help without a second thought. He used a combination of his powerful miracles and potent potions he had in his simple pack to eradicate the diseases that were devastating the village, and managed to pull Verem from the brink of death. Though not without consequences, the damage done by the disease left Verem with brain damage. He was slow to learn and understand new things when before he was showing to be one of the village's brightest young men. Once the diseases had been destroyed and the remaining villagers cured, restoring food and water was barely an issue for the roaming cleric. Resting every day as his miracles ran dry, restoring Verem's home, the young boy still recovering hung by his savior's side. When asked who he was, the roaming cleric would always just respond with, "I'm just a man doing his best to repay his debt to someone who saved me." Being in the middle of nowhere, the village was not familiar with divine magics or even the different gods. Wanting to learn more, Verem kept asking the stranger about his gods, often repeating his questions several times because the information couldn't stick to him from the brain damage. Still, the roaming cleric was patient and taught what he could to whoever would listen. Then one day, there were no more buildings that needed repair, there were food and water plentiful, and no one who needed medical treatment. And so, as quickly as the roaming cleric arrived, the roaming cleric left when there was nothing else for him to help with. The village now stabilized, and having found a deep respect to the man who saved his village. Verem left the village for the first time when he came of age to find one of the cleric's temples. He left with what he thought would be enough supplies to make it to a temple. The supplies would have lasted if he was able to follow the map he had. Each day he had to guess how far he went and in what direction, for he could not remember. Weeks passed, and the only thing Verem was certain of was that he was lost, far away from home, and dying once again. Then once more, he heard bagpipes. Life sprung back in him as he awaited to see the roaming cleric again. He waited for over an hour before realizing the sound wasn't traveling or moving away from a nearby forest. So the young man followed the sound deep into the luscious forest. He walked until his legs collapsed, crawled until his knees bled, and dragged himself by his chin to reach the sound. He passed out from the exhaustion and blood loss, thinking death was finally going to get its due. To his surprise, he woke up and found a beautiful golden Chiron standing before him. His body no longer injured nor exhausted. Not understanding what was before him, Verem tried to speak, but no words could escape his mouth, though no panic filled him. They didn't speak, but the Chiron seemed to understand the boy's desire to help people and made a pact. Verem was far from being able to comprehend the situation, about as far as Strahd is from being a saint. So his simple mind made the conclusion that this wondrous being to be a deity that the roaming cleric described to him all those years ago, and named himself a cleric for the Lady of Song and Joy. The Chiron did not seem to mind the name, as the wind around her would whistle a pleasant song similar to the flute. Verem then woke up in the same forest almost as it had been a dream. The type of dream that never leaves, especially as he discovered his new healing power bestowed by his Lady of Song and Fire. He now roams around helping people where he can to please his lady and to repay his self-assumed debt to the Roman cleric that saved his village. While he is truly a warlock, his simple-minded nature and lack of worldly experience leads him to believe he's a cleric. With a high charisma and low wisdom, he's damn hard to convince otherwise. Though if he ever realized his true nature, he would falter momentarily as his mind tried to comprehend he was only living a lie, only to conclude that it doesn't matter if he followed the Roman cleric's footsteps to the letter or not. Just as long as he could help people wherever he went, he would be satisfied with whoever he was. So if you ever hear a flute playing in the distance, there's a good chance a roaming man will follow who will aid any in need. Hey everyone, Brian Von VA here. If you like today's video, make sure to leave a like, and if you're new here, subscribe and ring that bell for all your lovely notification needs. Also follow MrRipper on Twitter, Twitch, and join the subreddit r/MrRipper. That way you can submit any story you have to us in an organized fashion. Using a help action, you can always come sub to me on YouTube, Brian Von VA, where I stream games and make voice acting videos. Imagination is always worth carrying with you throughout life. Useful in D&D as much as it is in your day-to-day routine when cleaning, working, or cooking. It's always helpful to practice playing with your imagination as often as you can. So never let anyone tell you to let go of that childlike whimsy you have in your heart, for if it brings a smile to you or to others, well hell, that's what it does. Keep it in your soul, guys and gals. All the love, everyone. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.